The cold was biting, bone-chilling, on an April morning that should have been warm. The wind howled through the intersection of Maple and 12th, carrying the pungent scent of gasoline from an old, run-down gas station stranded in a shabby neighborhood. Voices clashed in the distance. A burly man with a flushed face was shouting at the gas station attendant over a broken pump while the attendant muttered back, hands trembling as he held a burning cigarette. Cars raced by, horns blaring, drowning out all sounds, and no one paid attention to the tattered cardboard box lying next to the trash can. A box no one cared about, until it moved. Calum, a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes from countless sleepless nights, steered his rusty truck into the gas station. He wasn't the type to poke his nose into other people's business. Life had been harsh enough. But today something felt off. The whistling wind seemed to carry another sound, faint and nearly smothered by the city's chaotic noise. A soft, pitiful whimper, like the cry of a dying creature. Calum paused, clutching a steaming cup of coffee, his breath fogging in the icy air. He glanced at the box. Probably just a rat, he muttered. But then it moved again, more violently, more desperately. He took a step forward, each footfall heavy as if entering hostile territory. The whimper grew clearer, neither a rat nor a stray cat, but something alive, something pleading. Calum knelt, heart pounding as he peered inside. A tiny German shepherd puppy, barely 7 weeks old, cowered in the corner. Its thin fur was matted and soaked from rain, one eye sealed shut with dried pus, the other wide open, glimmering with primal fear. It shivered violently, frail little spasms shaking its emaciated body as if it might shatter. Beneath it, a soaked rag reeked of filth, scattered with gnawed remnants of stale bread, the last traces of whatever pitiful existence someone had abandoned. Calum knelt closer, his breath quickening. "Hey there, little guy," he rasped, voice thick with emotion. The puppy didn't growl or bark, just stared back, pleading as if knowing this was a final chance. Calum glanced around. No one in sight, no sign of whoever had discarded this fragile life. Only the distant echo of the man yelling at the gas station, and the roar of passing trucks that seemed to swallow the world whole. Shrugging off his threadbare jacket, Calum reached into the box. The puppy whimpered, flinching away but too weak to resist. "Easy now, I won't hurt you," he murmured, his tone softening. As he lifted the puppy, cold seeped through the jacket, biting into his skin. The tiny body felt like a block of ice, its heartbeat faint and rapid. Calum cradled it closer, feeling the panicked breath of the fragile creature. He thought of his wife, Isolde, bound to their cramped apartment by the lingering pain of a recent surgery. She loved dogs, had grown up with great hounds in her rural hometown. They had dreamed of having a dog, but life's hardships had put that wish on hold. And now, a dying creature in his arms? Was this fate? Calum jumped into the truck, placing the puppy on the passenger seat, bundled in the jacket. He drove with one hand, eyes darting back to the trembling pup whose gaze never left his, as if placing its entire life in Calum's hands. "You'll meet Isolde," he said, voice gruff. "She'll love you." When he opened the door to the apartment, the warm scent of coffee and familiar lavender washed over him. Isolde sat by the window, wheelchair beside her, legs still braced in recovery. She looked up, surprised. "You're home early?" Calum managed a small smile and unwrapped his jacket. "I brought something." Isolde gasped, eyes wide. "Oh my God, Calum." The puppy lifted its head, trembling, but something miraculous happened. Instead of shrinking back, it let out a soft whimper, reaching a tiny paw toward her. Calum placed the puppy in her lap and she cradled it, hands trembling as she stroked the small head. "Poor thing," she whispered, tears welling up. The puppy sighed, melting into her touch. For the first time in weeks, Calum saw Isolde smile. A deep, radiant smile like light breaking through darkness. They named him Shadow, for from that moment on, he never left her side. But they had no idea Shadow had not come just to be rescued. He had come with a mission, one that would soon leave them both astonished. Just a few days after Shadow set foot in Calum and Isolde's small apartment, the atmosphere in the house began to change. It wasn't because of the presence of a puppy, but because of the strange signs, the unspoken warnings that Shadow carried with him. Isolde, bound to her wheelchair and trapped in the persistent pain of her surgery, found comfort in Shadow's deep, soulful eyes. She stroked his soft ears, whispered gentle words, and the puppy responded by nestling close, as if he understood she was his whole world. But Caleb, with the wary instincts of a man hardened by harsh times, began to notice something unusual. Shadow wasn't just a frail pup rescued from the brink of death. He was watching. He was waiting. The first night, when darkness engulfed the apartment, Shadow slept in the little bed Caleb had made from an old hoodie and a soft blanket of Isolde's. The puppy lay curled up, breathing steadily, but his tiny ears twitched at every gust of wind slipping through the window. Caleb lay in bed, arms behind his head, eyes fixed on the ceiling. He didn't voice it, but questions brewed in his mind. Why would someone abandon a purebred German shepherd like Shadow? Why had the pup flinched in terror when he accidentally dropped his work gloves on the floor? Caleb closed his eyes, pushing the thoughts away, but then at 2:46 a.m., everything shattered. Shadow barked. Not the weak yelp of a frightened puppy, but a sharp, decisive sound, a warning that sliced through the silence. Caleb bolted upright, heart hammering against his ribs. "What the hell?" he muttered, eyes scanning the dark room. Shadow was already up, ears standing tall, body rigid as a statue. His gaze was locked onto the window where the faint streetlight flickered through thin curtains. Caleb held his breath, tracing Shadow's line of sight. Nothing but the rustling trees and the hum of distant traffic. Then he heard it, a metallic clink, faint but unmistakable from the back door. He stood, bare feet treading lightly across the hallway, each step stretching time. Shadow didn't wait for a command. He followed silently, no leash, no noise, only the soft patter of tiny paws. At the back door, Caleb stopped, ears straining. The sound had vanished, replaced by the hum of the fridge and the thundering pulse in his ears. He waited, fists clenched. No footsteps, no voices, just that dreadful silence. He turned to head back, but Shadow didn't move. The puppy stood before the door, frozen like a sentinel, eyes glowing in the darkness. The next morning, Caleb didn't mention it to Isolde. He didn't want to worry her, but the unease gnawed at him. From that moment, Shadow became Isolde's shadow in every sense. Wherever she wheeled herself, he followed. When she napped, he curled up beneath her, ears always alert. When she wept from the pain in her leg, he rested his small head on her lap, silent, sharing her grief. Within a week, Isolde had taught him to sit. By the second week, Shadow began responding to the tiniest sounds, the kettle whistling, the phone buzzing, like a devoted companion. He wasn't just smart. He was watching everything, a tiny soldier in a puppy's guise. Then came the third night and everything escalated. Caleb came home late after an extra shift, the clock ticking well past midnight. He eased the door open, careful not to wake Isolde. The apartment was silent, but Shadow didn't run out to greet him like usual. Caleb set down his bag, kicked off his boots, and then he heard it, a low rumbling growl from the bedroom. He strode forward, heart thudding. Shadow stood at the edge of the bed, back arched, body tense, teeth bared. But not at Caleb, at the open window. Caleb rushed over, eyes sweeping the outside. The curtains swayed, the blinds slightly bent, but no one was there. Only the wind howled, the night thick with the scent of rain. Shadow didn't ease up until Caleb's hand rested on his back. The puppy's hackles lowered, but his eyes never left the window. Caleb stood there a long time, pulse racing. The wind couldn't have bent the blinds like that. The sound at the back door wasn't a trick of the mind. Something was happening, and Shadow knew it before he did. The next day, while taking out the trash, Caleb noticed the side gate ajar. Not blown open by the wind, someone had unlatched it. He stood there, clutching the trash bag, knuckles whitening. They never used that gate. Isolde couldn't even reach it. So who had done it? Back inside, Caleb kept his tone casual. "Did you let Shadow out this morning?" he asked. Isolde shook her head. "No, he's been with me all morning." "Why?" Caleb hesitated. "Gates open." Isolde paused, hands trembling around her tea mug. "Maybe it was the wind," she offered weakly, but her eyes betrayed the lie. Caleb forced a grin. "Yeah, maybe." But they both knew better. Later that afternoon, while Isolde underwent in-home physical therapy, Shadow never left the room. He watched the therapist closely, not aggressive but protective. When Isolde nearly toppled off her wheelchair, Shadow wedged himself under her arm, steadying her. The therapist looked impressed. Was he trained for this? Caleb and Isolde exchanged glances. "No," Caleb replied slowly. "Just instinct." But he knew it was more than that. Shadow was waiting for something bigger. That night, Calum installed a cheap motion-sensing camera facing the backyard. He didn't tell Isolde, just wanted peace of mind. He stayed awake until nearly 2 a.m., eyes glued to his phone screen, watching the grainy live feed. Shadow lay on the rug beside the bed, eyes fixed on the door. At 3:14 a.m., the phone vibrated. Motion detected. Calum opened the app, heart pounding. A blurred shape hovered near the gate, then stepped back and vanished. The camera missed the figure slipping away, but 10 seconds later, Shadow sprang up, barking ferociously. Calum dashed to the door, hearing the fading thud of footsteps. He didn't chase, there was no need. Shadow had done what no alarm could. The next morning, Calum replayed the footage over and over. Isolde watched from her wheelchair, face pale. "You think it's the same person?" she asked, voice trembling. Calum nodded. "And I don't think he's done." That evening, Calum reinforced the locks, installed new cameras and put up motion lights. "I should have done this sooner," he muttered. Isolde didn't argue. She hadn't slept well either. But she looked down at Shadow nestled at her feet. "If it wasn't for him," she whispered, "we wouldn't have known." Calum nodded. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was their shield, and whatever was out there wasn't finished. The next night, Calum didn't sleep. He combed through footage, frame by frame, as Shadow lay vigilant beside Isolde. Then at 8:03 p.m. his phone vibrated. Motion detected. He opened the app. The gate swung slowly but no one appeared. Calum's pulse quickened. He grabbed his flashlight and crept outside, Shadow at his side. At the gate, Calum saw it, a fresh shoe print too small to be his or Isolde's. Shadow sniffed it, looked up at Calum and growled. Whoever it was, they were getting bolder. The danger was closer than ever. After those harrowing nights, Calum and Isolde's apartment was no longer just a place to live. It became a small fortress, fortified with new locks, bright motion sensor lights, and a little puppy with instincts far beyond its age. But the final confrontation was still lurking, and Shadow, with his sharp eyes that never seemed to close, had been ready for a long time. That fateful night came at 1:11 a.m. Calum had just drifted into a fitful sleep after hours of tension when Shadow let out a low, rumbling growl, not a bark, but a deep sound like an engine revving before a storm. He jolted awake, cold sweat beading on his forehead. Isolde sat up too, clutching the blanket tightly. "Again?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Shadow was already at the window, ears perked, tail stiff, eyes locked on the darkness outside. Calum grabbed his phone and opened the camera app. Motion detected. Backyard. He tapped the screen and this time the image was crystal clear and chilling. A hooded figure holding something glinting under the dim light. There was no time to hesitate. Calum slipped on his shoes, gripping an old police baton, something he had used back when he was on the force, now gathering dust in the closet. "Stay inside," he ordered Isolde, voice firm. "Lock the door behind me." She nodded, eyes glued to Shadow. The dog didn't wait. He bolted to the back door, a small warrior ready to face danger. Calum eased the door open, icy air rushing in, carrying the scent of wet earth and eerie silence. The motion lights snapped on, but the backyard was empty, too empty. Shadow didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the fence, barking furiously, the sound echoing like a challenge. Calum followed, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. He heard footsteps, fast, frantic, and Shadow's fierce growls. The dog burst through a low hedge, tearing through the night. Calum caught up, just in time to see the intruder vaulting over the fence. A man in a black hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder, a small flashlight clipped to his belt flickering as he moved. Shadow closed the gap, but the man spun, spraying a burst of pepper spray directly into the dog's face. Shadow staggered back, yelping in pain, collapsing onto the grass. Calum saw red. He tackled the man to the ground, fists pounding. "You picked the wrong house," he snarled, breath heaving. The man cried out, struggling, but Calum pinned him until the police arrived. When the patrol car lights flashed in the yard, the intruder was cuffed, face bloodied. In his backpack they found rope, gloves, and a folding knife, the very one he had dropped the night before. He had been watching their house for weeks, waiting for Calum to leave, targeting Isolde as an easy victim. He hadn't counted on Shadow. Inside, Calum knelt beside Shadow, gently washing his face with milk and warm water. The pepper spray made him whine, but his eyes remained open, ashamed as if he thought he had failed. "You didn't fail," Calum whispered, cradling his small face. You saved her. You saved us. Isolde knelt beside them, a hand resting on Shadow's back. He's not just a pet, she said. Calum nodded. He's family. 2 days later, the story reached the local news. A neighbor's Ring camera had captured the chase, and the host called Shadow a real-life hero. But Calum didn't care about the spotlight. What mattered to him was the truth. Shadow didn't just bark, he acted. He leaped into danger without hesitation because he knew who his family was. He carved a new tag for Shadow's collar, just one word, Guardian. From then on, Shadow didn't just sleep by the door. He slept between Calum and Isolde, not to guard the house but to protect the ones he loved. But the story didn't end there. Calum decided to learn more about Shadow's past. He took him to the vet, requesting a scan of the microchip. The results left him speechless. Shadow had once belonged to a cancelled military K-9 training program, a secret project that never went live. He was born for this, Calum told Isolde as they sat in the backyard, watching Shadow react to commands without ever being trained. Isolde smiled. I knew he was special from the start. He doesn't act like a normal puppy. He watches like he's memorizing everything. Time passed, and Shadow grew into a powerful, noble adult. He remained vigilant, loyal, sleeping between Calum and Isolde every night, waiting by the window when Calum left for work, and greeting Isolde each morning with a wagging tail. Isolde gradually healed, her smile returning, with Shadow at the heart of it all. One evening, a local news station asked for an interview. Calum hesitated. We don't need the attention, he said. But Isolde looked at Shadow, sitting perfectly at her feet. Maybe someone out there needs their own Shadow, she said. Maybe someone abandoned a dog like him. Calum agreed. The segment was brief, just 2 minutes, but by morning hundreds of messages flooded in, from veterans struggling with PTSD, women recovering from trauma, and shelters hoping Shadow could visit. Calum read each one, then looked at Shadow lying comfortably between him and Isolde. What do you think, buddy? He asked. Shadow opened one eye and wagged his tail. The next week, they brought Shadow to a community center for a youth therapy event. A silent 9-year-old boy knelt beside Shadow, rested his forehead against the dog's head, and whispered, I'm not scared when you're here. Calum and Isolde knew this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Shadow became a therapy dog, unofficially at first, then officially. He visited hospitals, schools, women's shelters, and veterans' homes. Calum and Isolde were always by his side, understanding that Shadow hadn't just saved them, he was saving others too. Years passed, but Shadow remained their quiet guardian. One evening, Isolde looked down at him and asked, Do you remember the box? Shadow glanced up, no bark, no wagging tail, just a calm, deep gaze. He remembered, and he knew he had found where he belonged. Life teaches us that the most precious things often come from the most unexpected places, like a discarded puppy in a box or a seemingly insignificant moment. Never underestimate the power of loyalty and love, whether from a person or a small creature. Open your heart, because sometimes saving someone else is the same as saving yourself. If you enjoyed this story and found it moving, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories. Let's spread hope and belief in the good things in life.